I really wanted to give you all an experience of what it is to be inside that aircraft. And for me, Top Gun is about competition.
On September 16, 1985, a veteran aerobatic pilot named Art Scholl, strapped into a modified Pitts S-2 biplane, climbed to altitude over the Pacific Ocean and deliberately threw himself into a flat spin. He was filming aerial footage for a movie. His last radio transmission was 5 words long. "I have a real problem." The plane hit the water off the coast of Carlsbad, California. They never recovered his body. They never recovered the aircraft. 7 months later, the movie Art Scholl died for opened in theaters. It made $357 million worldwide. It turned a 23-year-old actor into the biggest movie star on Earth. And it convinced an entire generation of young men that strapping into a fighter jet and dying for your country was the coolest thing a human being could possibly do. The movie was Top Gun. The year was 1986. And what happened that year, what Hollywood built, what the Pentagon bankrolled, and what American masculinity looked like when it flexed as hard as it possibly could, is a story that could not happen today. Not because the talent doesn't exist, because the culture won't allow it. The year masculinity peaked. May 2026 marks the 40th anniversary of Top Gun, and Paramount is pushing the original back into cinemas for a massive theatrical re-release on May 13th. A new generation is about to experience, unfiltered, the single most aggressive expression of American male fantasy ever committed to celluloid. But here's what makes this anniversary different from the 30th or the 35th. We've now had enough cultural distance, enough reckonings, enough revisions, enough awkward rewatches to finally articulate exactly what died in 1986. Not just a genre, an entire mode of masculinity. And the autopsy is fascinating. How Top Gun got made and what it cost. The whole thing started with a magazine article. In 1983, journalist Ehud Yonah published a piece in California magazine called Top Guns, chronicling daily life at the Navy Fighter Weapons School at Miramar. Producers Don Simpson and Jerry Bruckheimer read it and saw dollar signs. The casting process was a bloodbath. The studio cycled through Matthew Modine, John Cusack, Michael J. Fox, Tom Hanks, Patrick Swayze, and Emilio Estevez before Tom Cruise locked down the role that would define his career. Val Kilmer came aboard as the ice-cold Iceman. Anthony Edwards signed on as the Doomed Goose. And Tony Scott, a British director known for moody visuals, not military spectacles, was handed the keys. Because make no mistake, this was a military production disguised as a summer blockbuster. The producers paid the Department of Defense a shockingly low $1.8 million to access Miramar Naval Air Station, 4 active aircraft carriers, and entire squadrons of F-14 Tomcats, F-5 Tigers, and A-4 Skyhawks. Without that subsidized billion-dollar military hardware, the film's $13 to $15 million production budget would have produced something that looked like a cable TV reenactment. And then there was Art Scholl, the veteran aerobatic pilot and aerial cameraman who entered that flat spin to capture dramatic cockpit footage and never pulled out of it. His death was quietly absorbed into the production's mythology, a footnote in a billion-dollar legacy. The footage he died trying to capture was never used. The film was dedicated to his memory. Hollywood moved on. The box office explosion and the recruitment myth. Top Gun detonated, propelled by Tony Scott's golden hour cinematography, Berlin's Oscar-winning Take My Breath Away, and Kenny Loggins' Danger Zone. It earned over $8 million on opening weekend and closed 1986 as the highest-grossing film of the year, $176.8 million domestic, $357 million worldwide. Now, here's the myth you've probably heard repeated 1,000 times, that Navy recruitment surged 500% after Top Gun's release. It's one of the most cited statistics in film history, and it's wrong. Official defense data shows the actual increase in Navy enlistments between the 1985 and 1986 fiscal years was 8.3%, from roughly 87,000 to about 94,000 recruits. Still significant, but not the tidal wave the legend suggests. What was real was the cultural shift. The Navy set up recruitment booths directly outside cinema lobbies. They understood something Hollywood was just beginning to grasp. A 2-hour movie could do more for your brand than a decade of commercials. 1986, the year of Peak Macho. Top Gun wasn't operating in a vacuum. It was the crown jewel of a year so saturated with aggressive male power fantasies that historians have labeled 1986 the absolute zenith of Reagan-era hypermasculine cinema. Stallone dropped Cobra, a hyper-violent LAPD rampage that shattered Warner Brothers' opening weekend record with $15.6 million. Schwarzenegger unleashed Raw Deal, a cartoony infiltration thriller where the human body was essentially presented as a special effect. Chuck Norris and Lee Marvin teamed up for the Delta Force, a Canon Films epic where American military might annihilated foreign terrorists with the subtlety of a sledgehammer. And Louis Gossett Jr. starred in Iron Eagle, a film where a teenager literally steals an F-14 to rescue his father from the Middle East, because apparently that passed for a reasonable plot in 1986. Susan Jeffords' essential text, Hard Bodies, Hollywood Masculinity in the Reagan Era, gives us the academic framework. She argues the sculpted, indestructible action hero of the 80s wasn't just entertainment, it was ideology. After Vietnam and the perceived weakness of the 1970s, audiences craved mythic heroism and rugged individualism. The hard body was a direct metaphor for the revitalized American state under Ronald Reagan, and Top Gun was the purest distillation of that metaphor. Not the biggest muscles, not the highest body count, just the most seductive packaging of military power as personal cool ever produced. The Pentagon Hollywood pipeline. Top Gun didn't just benefit from military hardware, it cemented the modern pipeline between the Department of Defense and Hollywood that still operates today. Every branch of the military maintains an entertainment liaison office in Los Angeles, tasked explicitly with protecting and projecting the image of the armed forces through commercial entertainment. The deal is transactional. Filmmakers get access to billions in assets at a fraction of the cost. In exchange, they surrender script approval to the Pentagon. The DoD can demand changes to dialogue, plot lines, and character arcs. This makes the Pentagon an uncredited co-producer on thousands of films. The approved list tells you everything. Michael Bay's entire Transformers franchise. The DoD directed him to feature specific hardware like C-17S and aircraft carriers, turning the films into a military showreel for young demographics. Iron Man. The script was altered, so Tony Stark's father was reframed as a U.S. military contractor rather than a generic arms dealer. Godzilla in 2014. The Pentagon mandated the removal of a Japanese character's dialogue about a grandfather surviving the Hiroshima bombing. The rejected list is equally revealing. Platoon. Denied for depicting drug abuse, racism, and soldiers murdering civilians. Apocalypse. Now forced to film without U.S. support because of its cynical, anti-war narrative. The Avengers denied because the military launches a nuclear strike on New York City in the script. Top Gun wrote the playbook for all of it. Every time you see a gleaming aircraft carrier in a Marvel film or a perfectly lit squadron in a Michael Bay movie, you're watching the direct descendant of what Simpson and Bruckheimer negotiated in 1985. Why this brand of masculinity is now illegal. So here's the real question. Why can't Hollywood make the original Top Gun again, not the sequel, the original? Why is the specific brand of unapologetic, zero-irony masculinity that defined 1986 now culturally impossible? First, the MCU dismantled the stoic lone wolf. The modern action hero is quippy, self-aware, and emotionally vulnerable. Tony Stark made vulnerability profitable. Once that became the dominant mode, the stone-faced Stallone model became a relic overnight. Second, politics. Quentin Tarantino's famous monologue in the 1994 film Sleep With Me outlined a compelling argument that Top Gun is secretly about a man struggling with his own the Navy as rigid hetero rules, the rival pilots as temptation, the oiled-up volleyball scene, Iceman telling Maverick, "You can be my wingman anytime." Whether you buy the reading or not, it exposes something the 1986 audience never had to confront. The film's gender dynamics are paper-thin. Kelly McGillis exists almost entirely as a narrative checkpoint to assure the audience that Maverick is attracted to women. And third, the post-Me Too reckoning. The 1986 framework, where female characters had zero agency and male aggression was celebrated without qualification, now requires deliberate negotiation. You can't just flex anymore. You have to explain why you're flexing. And the moment you explain it, the fantasy collapses. Top Gun, Maverick, the careful resurrection, which is what makes Top Gun, Maverick such a fascinating case study. Released in 2022 after decades of development and the tragic death of Tony Scott in 2012, it had to honor the visceral legacy of 1986 while carefully updating its politics. Director Joseph Kosinski inherited $170 million in budget and 4 decades of cultural expectation. He threaded the needle almost perfectly. Crews insisted on practical effects and real flight footage. Actors strapped directly into F/A-18 cockpits, experiencing real G-forces. The antagonist nation is deliberately never named. No Cold War Russians, no Middle Eastern stand-ins, ensuring the film could play seamlessly in every global market without inciting political friction. Monica Barbaro joined as Phoenix, the franchise's first female fighter pilot, and the nostalgia callbacks. The leather jacket, the motorcycle, the bar sing-alongs, a beach football montage that safely replaced the infamous volleyball scene, honored the original tone without replicating its excesses. 96% on Rotten Tomatoes, 1.49 billion worldwide, the highest-grossing film of Cruise's entire career. Proof that the spirit of 1986 could be resurrected, but only if you knew exactly which parts to leave buried. The time capsule returns. On May 13, 2026, the original Top Gun returns to the big screen. Uncut, unedited, unapologetic. Every oiled-up volleyball spike, every wordless motorcycle ride, every frame of a 23-year-old Tom Cruise convincing an entire country that dying in a fighter jet was the most glamorous exit a man could ask for. It will play to audiences who grew up in a world where the MCU redefined what heroes look like, where the Pentagon's Hollywood pipeline has been publicly dissected, where the politics of the 80s have been debated, reappraised, and in many cases, rejected. And that's exactly why you should see it. Not as nostalgia, not as irony, as archaeology. Because Top Gun isn't just a movie about fighter jets. It's a fossilized record of the last moment American masculinity was allowed to be completely, unreservedly, almost delusionally confident. Before the cracks showed, before the questions started, before someone pointed out that the volleyball scene might not mean exactly what everyone thought it meant. 40 years later, it's still one of the most effective pieces of propaganda ever produced. It just happens to have a killer soundtrack.